To formally open this online event, may I call on the University Choir to lead us in the invocation. Thank you, University Choir, and their Program Director, Sir Joseph Reboriano. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Marshall Murillo, Faculty of the Social Sciences Department, Ateneo de Naga University. I will be your host moderator for today's relevant webinar, Take Courage, Stop Sexual Harassment, a webinar on understanding and preventing sexual harassment. For this webinar, the College Guidance Center, Program on Gender Concerns, Office of Student Affairs, and Committee on Decorum and Investigation, CODI, collaborate to present to you this anti-sexual harassment webinar as a proactive measure and as a part of CGC's Gender Sensitivity Session, OSA's Program on Student Rights and Responsibilities, in CODI's anti-sexual harassment advocacy. As an educational institution, we are committed to ensuring that the working and learning environment is harassment-free, where human rights and dignity of all members are preserved and protected. Since the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, there has been progress in protecting individuals from violators and abusers against sexual-related offenses. We have been drafting bills and laws which mandated the elimination of discrimination against women and stated that the government will penalize any acts of violence, whether the perpetrator is from the government or private individual. Sadly, despite these laws that are still proofs of abuses, discrimination, and violations happening, sexual harassment remains a serious and pervasive problem in the workplace and education environment. Even in this so-called new normal, where physical distancing has limited the face-to-face interactions of people. With the monumental increase in the use of digital technology and social media, the incidents of online sexual harassment have been more pronounced than before. Aside from the online cases of sexual abuses and violence, street harassment is rampant, where women are subjected to catcalling, wolf whistling, lascivious language, and unwanted touching. The question now is, how are we taking part as ordinary individuals to stop this? Are we doing something to stop harassment? Are we courageous enough to do something about it? That will be our focus for today's webinar. Let me now share with you the schedule of our webinar. There will be two parts. The first part is the talks of the two speakers, while the second part is the open forum. If you have any questions or comments to the presentation of the speakers, kindly post them through Zoom chat box or in the comment section of Ateneo de Naga University official Facebook account. Later, during the open forum, we will address them through the respective speakers. At this point, may I now call on our University President, Father Roberto Ezequiel E. Rivera, S.J., to give us the opening remarks.
To the Honorable Senator of the Philippine Republic, Senator Risa Hontiveros, to our distinguished guest speakers, Senior Assistant City Prosecutor Antonette, Majella, Sumayao-Nacor, and to Dr. Mira Alexis Ofreneo, Director of the Loyola School's Gender Hub of the Ateneo de Naga University. To all our students, faculty, staff, and administrators in the Ateneo de Naga University who are tuning in to this webinar, to all our guests, Diyos marhay na aldaw po sa saindo kabos. It is my distinct honor and pleasure to welcome all of you to this webinar entitled Take Courage, Stop Sexual Harassment, a webinar on understanding and preventing sexual harassment. We know that in our world today, and especially in a Catholic and Jesuit university like the Ateneo de Naga University, there is absolutely no place for prejudice, discrimination, and disrespect of any kind. And that is why we are truly fortunate that today, in this webinar, we are honored by our guest speakers and by no less than Senator Risa herself, the principal author of the Safe Spaces Act, as we try to discuss ways by which we, as one community, can avoid the evil of prejudice, discrimination, and above all, harassment and disrespect in society and in our university. My sincerest hope is that this webinar this afternoon will not only provide us, surely, with much needed information, but will inspire us to be champions like our distinguished guest speakers and Senator Risa, to be champions of social justice, of the upholding of the dignity of all persons, regardless of cultural or ethnic background, regardless of gender or sexual orientation, regardless of their position in society. I am very grateful, most especially, to our College Guidance Center, Program on Gender Concerns, the Office of Student Affairs, and the Committee on Decorum and Investigation of the Ateneo de Naga University for organizing this webinar. Let us pray for a truly enlightening and inspiring afternoon. Salamat po, asin Diyos mabalos sa saindo kabos.
Thank you, Father Robert. Now, we invited a special guest to share with us a message. Let me now invite Sir Rodolfo S.B. Vertus Jr., the OSA Director and the Chair of the Committee on Decorum and Investigation, to give us the introduction of our guest.
Maray na hapon sa gabos. It is an honor to introduce to you a special guest in today's anti-sexual harassment webinar. She is an Atenean, an award-winning journalist, an activist, an advocate of human rights, a legislator. She was a two-term congressional representative and is now a senator of the Philippines. She has worked hard in pushing for laws on health, education, women's rights, LGBT rights, and many other important civil rights. To name a few of her legislative accomplishments, she is the principal author of the Philippine Mental Health Law, Expanded Maternity Leave Law, and the Safe Spaces Act, which shall be discussed in this webinar. Please welcome, to give a message to all of us, Senator Risa Ontiveros.
Marhay na aldaw po sa Indogabos, sa mga uragon ng kapwa ko Atenista. Sinasabi nila na kapag babae ka, sakalam ka, malakas, matatag, hindi aatras sa anumang hamon ng buhay, isog sa Bicolano. Pero parang sa panahong ito ng pandemya, napakahirap hanapin kung saan tayo huhugot ng tapang at lakas. I just want to remind you, wonderful young women, na pwede tayong humugot ng lakas sa isa't isa. I've secured the passage of the Bawal Bastos Law to protect you against gender-based sexual harassment, online man o offline. Kaya hindi nakakatakot magsumbong o magsabi kayo sa inyong trusted teachers, parents, classmates, and friends when faced with threats or intimidation. Hindi natin namamalayan na when we speak up, we're helping other women to be courageous as well. Kaya choose to be brave and take courage because it allows us to do something despite our fears. It brings us to more than what we are told to be. It gets us out of our comfort zone and lets us grow beyond what society dictates. Courage helps us lift each other up. Diyos mabalos at Happy Women's Month sa ating lahat.
Thank you, Sir Sonny, and thank you, Senator Risa Hontiveros and Father Robert, for gracing us with your words. To give you a background of what is prepared for us this afternoon, we shall be joined by two experts from the legal and the mental health fields. The first speaker shall share details about sexual harassment from the legal perspective, and the second speaker shall walk us through the impact of harassment on one's mental health and well-being. Let me now introduce to you the first speaker. She took her bachelor's degrees in political science and economics here in Ateneo de Naga University. She finished her Bachelor of Law at the University of Santo Tomas in Manila. In 2000, she passed the bar. It was the year when the bar exam result only had 16.54%, the lowest percentage in the history of the Philippine bar. That same year, up to 2006, she worked in the Public Attorney's Office or PAO here in Naga. And from 2006 to present, she is part of the National Prosecution Service, Department of Justice. She is assigned in the Family Court of RTC Branch 28, where she handles all cases involving minor victims or minor offenders such as rape, child abuse, violence against women, among others. Send in your applause for Prosecutor Antonette Majella M. Sumayao-Nacor.
Good afternoon to all the students and teachers. I understand that we have the junior high school, the senior high school, the college, the graduate, and law students attending this webinar. So I will make my talk as understandable as possible to all the students of different levels and age brackets. I am just happy that this webinar pushed through despite the challenges that we had been and still going through. This talk was postponed for 2 occasions because of this pandemic and the parade of typhoons that visited our place. This afternoon, I will talk about the most recent law on sexual harassment, which is Republic Act 11313 or the Public Spaces Act, while comparing it to the previous law on sexual harassment, which is Republic Act 7877. It is very alarming that many cases of sexual abuse, such as sexual harassment, are happening recently, particularly when this pandemic erupted. It is alarming in the sense that we in the office have been hearing and receiving reports from the media, more particularly in the social media, about various kinds of sexual harassment being committed against minors and against students, committed by another student of the same school or of different school. And yet we do not receive complaints as we hear from the media and as what we see in the social media. It could be that one of the reasons why no cases are filed is because victims are apprehensive or afraid to come out to file their complaint. Or it could also be that the victims just do not know that there is a law that gives protection and addresses their concern, and they just do not know how to go about in filing a case. Or it could also be because the victims have different notion and understanding about certain things, that they are just discouraged to take steps to put their abusers behind bars. So through this webinar, I hope everyone would be enlightened and later on would find the courage to put an end to the sexual harassment that they are experiencing. The most recent law on sexual harassment is Republic Act 11313, otherwise known as the Safe Spaces Act. Now, the complete title of Republic Act 11313 is an act defining gender-based sexual harassment in streets, public spaces, online, workplaces, and educational or training institutions, providing protective measures and prescribing penalties therefore. But this law is popularly known as the Bawal Bastos Law. This law gives protection to any person being subjected to various kinds of sexual harassment, not only in the workplace, in the training or educational institution, but also on the streets, on the public spaces, and online, which are not present in the first sexual harassment law, which is Republic Act 7877. Under the original law of sexual harassment, which is RA 7877, it only gives protection to sexual harassment in the workplace, in the educational and training institution. However, in RA 11313, the law was expanded and made more comprehensive so as to include sexual harassment committed on the streets, on the public spaces, and online. Now, RA 11313 was signed into law by President Duterte on April 17, 2019. That is why I was able to say that this is a new law. Now, from the time it was signed into law until at present, our office has not yet received a single complaint involving violations of these offenses. And in fact, I still verified as of March 17, 2021, if there are any cases already filed, but I was informed that there was none yet. So there is a need to raise public awareness regarding this law. And I am happy that through this webinar, I was able to share my knowledge to you concerning this law. And even the police, I believe they are not yet fully equipped with sufficient information and knowledge in the filing of sexual harassment cases involving RA 11313, which is the reason why no cases has as yet been filed in our office to date. So let us start with the discussion. There are four types of sexual harassment under RA 11313. First, it is the gender-based streets and public spaces sexual harassment. Second, the gender-based online sexual harassment. Third, gender-based sexual harassment in the workplace. And fourth, gender-based sexual harassment in educational and training institutions. Okay. So first, we will discuss the first type of sexual harassment, which is gender-based streets and public spaces sexual harassment. It may be committed through any unwanted and uninvited sexual actions or remarks against any person regardless of the motive. So, the protection is given to everyone, be it a man, a woman, or a person of different sexual preference or orientation. Now, do not have the notion that this law is specifically made only for women, because the law does not make any distinction in this law. So when the law does not distinguish, we should not make any distinction. So what specific acts are covered by the street and public spaces sexual harassment? They are as follows. First, we have catcalling. It refers to unwanted remarks directed towards a person, commonly done in the form of wolf whistling and misogynistic, transphobic, homophobic, and sexist slurs. And please also take note of the highlighted words unwanted and uninvited sexual actions or remarks. Otherwise, it could not be considered as a street and public spaces sexual harassment. Motive for the commission of the act is likewise inconsequential. It could be that the act was done purely for appreciation purposes and not really with lustful intent. However, the law does not make any distinction for as long as it is unwanted and uninvited. Second is wolf whistling, or what we commonly know in Tagalog as sipol, or in Bicol, taghoy. So, it is an expression of sexual attraction or admiration. So, diba, as defined by the law on streets and public spaces sexual harassment, even if it is for admiration purposes, it will still be considered as an offense or a violation of RA 11313. Third is unwanted invitations. Now, please note that a single invitation would not suffice. It should be persistent or repetitive to the point na yung parang makulit na despite the fact that the invitee has already declined the invitation and yet paulit-ulit pa rin sa pag-i-invite. So I guess that would fall under unwanted invitations. Fourth is misogynistic, which is defined as strongly prejudiced against women. Now, look at the illustration here, which says that I tell my friends to be rafter with their wives. So, it is a misogynistic statement. Now, look at this next picture, which is another illustration of misogynistic. The words written here are so small, so I will just read it to you. Now, the first woman in the picture, the words stated here are as follows. It says, women cannot drive, women cannot be bishops, women cannot be trusted, women cannot speak in church. Now, the second woman in the picture, the labels there states that women shouldn't have rights, women shouldn't vote, women shouldn't work, and women shouldn't box. Now, the labels on the third woman depicted in the picture says that women should stay at home, women should be slaves, women should be in the kitchen, and women should not speak in church. So this is really all the words being stated here are all misogynistic remarks and statements against women. Fifth is transphobic. It encompasses a range of negative attitudes, feelings, or actions toward transgender or transsexual people or toward transsexuality. Transphobia can include fear, aversion, hatred, violence, anger, or discomfort felt or expressed towards people who do not conform to society's gender expectation. Now, this picture is an illustration of transphobic. The sixth act, which constitute a street and public spaces offense, is homophobic or having or showing dislike of or prejudice against homosexual people. So just look at the illustration being depicted here, which says, "You gay bastard." Seventh is sexist slurs. It is a term of disparagement used to refer to members of a given gender, sex, or sexual orientation in a derogatory manner. Motivation for using a sexual slur is often sexism and or bias against a sexual orientation or practice. By way of example, di ba, whenever we're on the road and some men would comment that, kaya pala ang bagal ng patakbo nung kasunod natin, kaya pala kasi babae. O di ba, we can oftenly hear those kinds of remarks. Or maybe, parang hindi tama yung maniobra sa pag-drive nung babae, and yun na naman, same remark would be made by some persons who would say, kasi pala, kaya pala ganyan, kasi babae. So, that's an example of sexist slurs. 8 is persistent, uninvited comments or gestures on a person's appearance. Example, one would say, ay, ang taba-taba niya, ang pangit-pangit niya, ang dami niyang pimples, or ang laki ng ang laki ng boobs. Or when you say gestures, maybe a person would make a hand gesture as if showing that the boobs of a woman is big or the butt is big, or even an FU sign. It is also a gesture which is constitutive of sexual harassment. Next is a relentless request for personal details, such as maybe asking for your cell phone number, your home address, and such other personal details, which is also persistent or makulit. That would also fall under number 9. 10th is statement of sexual comments and suggestions. So, ano bang example? Halimbawa, maybe someone would say, ay, parang ang sarap-sarap mong halikan. Well, it could be a statement of sexual comment and suggestions. Or someone would utter, siguro, mas sexy ka kung nakapanty at bra ka lang. So, that is another example. 11th is public masturbation or flashing of private parts. So, maybe it's self-explanatory, the showing off of the private parts. And the 12th is the groping or any advances, whether verbal or physical. When we say groping, diba, tinatouch, someone is touching your body, more specifically the sensitive parts of your body. So all those 12 specific acts just mentioned should be unwanted and has threatened one's sense of personal space and physical safety. and committed in public spaces such as alleys, roads, sidewalks, and parks, buildings, schools, churches, restaurants, malls, public washrooms, bars, internet shops, public markets, transportation terminals, PUVs, as well as private vehicles covered by app-based transport network services, example, Grab, spaces used as evacuation centers, government offices, recreational spaces such as but not limited to cinema halls, theaters, and spas. So what would be the penalty or penalties for such specific acts which we just mentioned and their corresponding prescriptive period for gender-based streets and public spaces sexual harassment? So they are as follows. So by the way, when you say prescriptive period, it is the period wherein a person is allowed to file a case without it being dismissed. So it just means that it should be filed within a certain allowable period. Otherwise, you can file it in the prosecutor's office. However, it will just be dismissed. For acts such as cursing, wolf whistling, catcalling, leering and intrusive gazing, taunting, unwanted invitations, misogynistic, transphobic, homophobic, and sexist slurs, persistent unwanted comments on one's appearance, relentless requests for one's personal details, the use of words, gestures, or actions that ridicule on the basis of sex, gender, or sexual orientation, identity, and or expression, including sexist, homophobic, and transphobic statements and slurs, the persistent telling of sexual jokes, use of sexual names, comments, and demands, and any statement that has made an invasion on a person's personal space or threatens the person's sense of personal safety are penalized as follows. For the first offense, we have a fine of 1,000 pesos and community service of 12 hours, inclusive of attendance to a gender sensitivity seminar. And for the second offense, we have arresto menor. When we say arresto menor, it consists of imprisonment ranging from 6 to 10 days or a fine of 3,000 pesos. And for the third offense, we have again arresto menor for 11 to 30 days and a fine of 10,000 pesos. So please note that for the second offense, it may be imprisonment of 6 to 10 days or a fine of 3,000, whereas for the third offense, both imprisonment and fine is imposed by the court. And for the prescriptive period, the period is 1 year. So within 1 year from the commission of the offense, such complaint should already be filed before the prosecutor's office. Next, for acts such as making offensive body gestures at someone and exposing private parts for sexual gratification of the perpetrator with the effect of demeaning, harassing, threatening, or intimidating the offended party, including flashing of private parts, public masturbation, groping, and similar lewd actions, the penalty are as follows. For first offense, penalty is fine of 10,000 pesos and community service of 12 hours, inclusive of attendance to a gender sensitivity seminar. For the second offense, we have arresto menor or imprisonment ranging from 11 to 30 days or a fine of 15,000 pesos. And for the third offense, arresto mayor or imprisonment of 1 month and 1 day to 6 months and a fine of 20,000 pesos. The prescriptive period for this above mentioned acts is for a period of 3 years, which is much longer compared to the previous one which we have just discussed. Next is for acts of stalking, and any of the acts mentioned in section 11 paragraphs A and B when accompanied by touching, pinching, or brushing against the body of the offended person, or any touching, pinching, or brushing against the genitalia, face, arms, anus, groin, breast, inner thighs, buttocks, or any part of the victim's body, even when not accompanied by acts mentioned in sections 11, paragraphs A and B, the penalties are as follows. First offense, arresto menor, consisting of 11 to 30 days imprisonment, or a fine of 30,000 pesos. For the second offense, arresto mayor, ranging from 1 month and 1 day to 6 months, or a fine of 50,000 pesos. And for the third offense, arresto mayor in its maximum period, which is 6 months, or a fine of 100,000 pesos. Now, the prescriptive period here is 10 years. The implementing bodies for the streets and public spaces sexual harassment are as follows. First, the Metro Manila Development Authority. So this is for Metro Manila. The local units of the PNP for other provinces, and the Women and Children's Protection Desk of the PNP. They shall have the authority to apprehend perpetrators and enforce the law. Let us now proceed to the second type of sexual harassment under RA 11313, which is gender-based online sexual harassment. This is provided for under Section 12 of the aforesaid law. Now, what are the acts constituting online sexual harassment? There are 6 enumerations here. First is acts that use information and communications technology in terrorizing and intimidating victims through physical, psychological, and emotional threats. Now, here, it uses information and communications technology such as maybe your cell phone, the social media, the Facebook, Twitter, or whatever form of information and communication technology. These are the mediums wherein online sexual harassment can be committed of this first act. Now, by way of example, I would like to cite a case which I handled. The victim is a grade 8 student, and somebody made a friend request on her on her Facebook, which she readily accepted, and then later on they communicated by way of chat through the messenger, and in the process the girl or the victim was able to share some secrets to the guy, like she was able to tell him that she has a boyfriend and that she is already an orphan, and the one taking care of her is only her grandmother, and that the one financing her studies is a strict aunt who told her, that she would stop financing her studies if she would found out that she has a boyfriend. So that guy used that information which she obtained from the victim to blackmail her by threatening her that he would tell the victim's aunt that she has a boyfriend, and he would send the screenshots of their communication showing that indeed the victim admitted that she has a boyfriend. So the victim was so afraid that her aunt would actually stop financing her studies. So she gave in to the demands of the guy, and she went with him to a hotel with a condition that he would not tell her aunt and that he would delete all the communications that they had. However, that guy did not make good of his promise and in fact continued to blackmail the victim. So that incident was repeated, the sexual abuse was repeated again and again until such time that the grades of the victim was affected, and then later on she was able to relate her problem to a friend, and the friend related to her grandmother, which later on was learned by her aunt. When the case was filed in our office and was referred to me, I was the one who conducted the preliminary investigation. I was looking for the screenshot of those communications that they had for me to prove that indeed they had that communication. However, the victim told me that she already deleted those conversations because she's afraid that somebody might read the communication that they had. So she had them all deleted. So there was no evidence to prove regarding that communication. So the problem was solved anyway. Was solved. It was ultimately filed in court. But please, as an advice, never ever delete those online communications because it is evidence. Please don't also destroy the SIM card because it is there where we can extract all those communications, even if those were deleted. Maybe the experts would be able to retrieve those information. So let's not make it difficult. So please, as an advice, please don't delete those messages because they are evidence. Okay, let's proceed to number 2. The second act constituting online sexual harassment is unwanted sexual, misogynistic, transphobic, homophobic, and sexist remarks and comments online, whether publicly or through direct and private messages. Now, we already discussed these terms earlier. So, if this were done or were made online, then it constitutes online sexual harassment. Third is invasion of victims' privacy through cyberstalking and incessant messaging. Now, cyberstalking and incessant messaging should go together. If it is only cyberstalking, it would not prosper as online sexual harassment. So, incessant messaging means persistent, repetitive, or makulit na pagme-message. So, cyberstalking and incessant messaging should go together to constitute online sexual harassment. Next is uploading and sharing without the consent of the victim any form of media that contains photos, voice, or video with sexual content. Fifth is any unauthorized recording and sharing of any of the victim's photos, videos, or any information online. Sixth, impersonating identities of victims online or posting lies about victims to harm their reputation, or filing false reports to online platforms to silence victims. There are instances, diba, when we will just learn that we have another account when in fact we did not create it. We will see our picture there, our name, making it appear that it is our account when in fact we did not create it. So it is a form of online sexual harassment. The penalty for online sexual harassment is prison correctional in its minimum period, 4 years, or a fine of not less than 100,000 pesos but not more than 500,000 pesos, or both at the discretion of the court. And also, it is imprescriptible. So there is no prescriptive period of 1 year, 3 years, or 10 years, unlike in streets and public spaces sexual harassment. Here, you can file it at any time, even after 20 years. So there is no limit as to when you would be able to file the case if it constitutes online sexual harassment. So from whom would you seek help if you want to file online sexual harassment? It is the PNP Anti-Cybercrime Group, or the PNP ACG, which is primarily responsible for the implementation of pertinent Philippine laws on cybercrime and shall receive complaints for online sexual harassment. The PNP ACG in turn would forward the complaint to the prosecutor's office for preliminary investigation or inquest, as the case may be. If the evidence needed for the successful prosecution or filing of online sexual harassment is only in the possession or in the hands of the perpetrator, or it can only be obtained from the service providers such as Smart and Globe. Now, there is a need to get a written order from the court, and that written order shall be issued only upon written application and examination under oath or affirmation of the applicant and witness he may produce. It will only be given once there is a reasonable ground to believe that gender-based online sexual harassment has been committed or is about to be committed, and the evidence to be obtained is essential to the conviction of any person or to the solution or prevention of such crime. Now, if no such written order is obtained, then any evidence obtained in violation thereof shall be inadmissible in evidence in any and all investigation. Let us now proceed to qualified gender-based streets, public spaces, and online sexual harassment. Now, a while ago, I already discussed the penalties for streets, public spaces, and online sexual harassment. Now, here, when we say qualified, if any of these 5 instances enumerated here would be present, then the penalty prescribed for the offenses committed on the streets and public spaces and online sexual harassment would be increased because of the presence of these instances. So what are these circumstances wherein the case would be qualified? They are as follows. First, the act takes place in a common carrier or a PUV, including but not limited to jeepneys, taxis, tricycles, or app-based transport network vehicle service, where the perpetrator is the driver of the vehicle and the offended party is the passenger. Second is the offended party is a minor, a senior citizen, a person with disability, or a breastfeeding mother nursing her child. Third is the offended party is diagnosed with a mental problem tending to impair consent. Fourth, if the perpetrator is a member of the uniformed services such as PNP, AFP, Philippine Army, and the act was perpetrated while the perpetrator was in uniform. And lastly, if the act takes place in the premises of a government agency offering frontline services to the public and the perpetrator is a government employee. Let us proceed to the third type of sexual harassment, which is gender-based sexual harassment in the workplace. What are the acts constituting gender-based sexual harassment in the workplace? These are as follows. First, an act or series of acts involving any unwelcome sexual advances, request or demand for sexual favors, or any act of sexual nature, whether done verbally, physically, or through the use of technology such as text messaging that has or could have a detrimental effect on the conditions of an individual's employment or education, job performance, or opportunities. So what are these unwelcome sexual advances? Like yung nag-aakbay, yung nagtatouch ng hand, yung nag-hold ng waist, so they can consider it as sexual advances. And also just like that as what appears in the picture. And this can be done either verbally or through text messaging. Next is a conduct or sexual nature and other conduct based on sex affecting the dignity of a person, which is unwelcome, unreasonable, and offensive to the recipient, whether done verbally, physically, or through the use of technologies such as text messaging. Well, I have a case wherein while the lady employee was typing something, her superior approached her and showed her a picture from his cell phone depicting two persons doing sexual act which is doggy style. So because of that, she was so much offended. So it is unwelcome, unreasonable, and offensive, which falls under this second type of sexual harassment being done in the workplace. Third is a conduct that is unwelcome and pervasive and creates an intimidating, hostile, or humiliating environment for the recipient. I'll share to you another case. Here, the victim is a pregnant lady employee, almost 8 months pregnant. Now, while she was also doing some paperwork, her employer approached her and touched her tummy. And while he was touching her stomach, it came to a point that his hands almost reached her breast and her vagina. So that act or conduct made by the employer is so unwelcome and pervasive and creates an intimidating and hostile environment for the recipient. Here in RA 11313, the crime of gender-based sexual harassment may also be committed between peers and those committed to a superior officer by a subordinate or to a teacher by a student. Comparing this to the first sexual harassment law, which is RA 7877, that sexual harassment under RA 7877 can only be committed by the employers, the superior officers, and the teachers, and not the other way around. But here, under the new law, it can be committed by the peers and by a subordinate to a superior officer and by a student to a teacher. So that's a big distinction. Another difference is that while under RA 7877, the sexual advances, request, or demand for sexual favors is in exchange for the hiring, for the promotion, for the granting of additional salary. Here, under RA 11313, there is no such mention for as long as there was an unwelcome sexual advance or request or for a sexual favor or any act of sexual nature that would already be considered as sexual harassment in the workplace. What would be the liability of the employers? Now, in addition to liabilities for committing acts of gender-based sexual harassment, employers may also be held responsible for, first, non-implementation of their duties as indicated under Section 17 of this Act, which is non-dissemination or posting of a copy of this Act, which is RA 11313, in a conspicuous place in the workplace, conduct of seminars to prevent sexual harassment, failed to create an independent internal mechanism or a committee on decorum and investigation to investigate and address complaints of gender-based sexual harassment. The penalty here is fine of not less than 5,000 pesos nor more than 10,000 pesos. Now, second is the not taking of action on reported acts of gender-based sexual harassment committed in the workplace, whereas the corresponding penalty is fine of not less than 10,000 pesos nor more than 15,000 pesos. Let us proceed to the last type of sexual harassment, which is gender-based sexual harassment in educational and training institutions. Now, the law says that all schools, so it should be public or private, shall designate an officer in charge to receive complaints on violations of this act. So, Ateneo should have an officer in charge to receive complaints for violation of RA 11313. Schools shall likewise ensure to provide students with a gender-sensitive environment that is both respectful to the victim's needs and conducive to truth-telling. Now, the school authority tasked to receive complaints of this nature should be well equipped with sufficient skills and knowledge so that the victim would be able to open up her problem or her complaint regarding the act being complained of. Now, the person receiving the complaint should be warm, emphatic, and should refrain from blaming the students because sometimes um, we are tempted to blame the students like, kasi, bakit ka naman kasi naglasing o bakit ka kasi nakipag-join, uminom, o bakit naman kasi super iksi nung suot mo o kaya tuloy hayan, nahaharas ka. So we should refrain from doing this so that the victim would be comfortable enough to open up his or her problem, which would encourage her to proceed with her complaint against the offender. Likewise, the place should be conducive to truth-telling. Dapat walang maraming tao na present dyan sa place kung saan mag-open up yung victim. Dapat may sense of privacy and secrecy so that the victim would be able to open up everything. Otherwise, baka the victim would be able to open up nga. However, she or he would not be able to tell everything kasi medyo hesitant siya because of the presence of other people. Now, the law provides that every school must adopt and publish grievance procedures to facilitate the filing of complaints by students and faculty members. Now, the law likewise requires that even if an individual does not want to file complaint or does not request the school to take any action on behalf of a student or faculty member, and school authorities have knowledge or reasonably know about a possible or impending act of gender-based sexual harassment or sexual violence, schools should promptly investigate to determine the veracity of such information or knowledge and the circumstances under which the acts of sexual harassment or sexual violence were committed, and to take appropriate steps to resolve the situation. So, it is not necessary that a complaint by a student or a victim should first be filed before the school would take steps. The law is clear that even if the individual would not want to file a complaint or does not request the school to take action, for as long as the school receives or have that information, be it through the social media or in whatever form, for as long as the school has already gained that information, then the school has that obligation to conduct investigation and to verify as to the truthfulness of such report and to take steps to stop or to eliminate that kind of sexual abuse or sexual violence that has happened. Now, if a school knows or reasonably should know about the acts of gender-based sexual harassment or sexual violence being committed that creates a hostile environment, school must take immediate action to eliminate the same acts, prevent their recurrence, and address their effects. School authorities should even assist and encourage the victims to file the appropriate criminal actions or other legal remedies that might be available to seek redress for the wrong that has been committed to the victim. Now, once a perpetrator is found guilty, the school may reserve the right to strip the diploma from the perpetrator or issue an expulsion order. The Committee on Decorum and Investigation, or CODI, of all educational institutions shall address gender-based sexual harassment and online sexual harassment in accordance with the rules and procedures contained in their CODI manual. Now, Ateneo has a CODI which is entitled Rules and Regulations Implementing the Anti-Sexual Harassment Act of 1995 in Ateneo de Naga University. However, I believe this was still based under the original sexual harassment law. So I guess there is just a need to amend it to conform to RA 11313. So let us proceed to the duties of the school heads, which is covered by Section 22. It says that one of the duties is to disseminate or post a copy of this act in a conspicuous place in the educational institution. Second, to provide measures to prevent gender-based sexual harassment in the educational institutions, like information campaigns, and to create an independent internal mechanism or a CODI to investigate and address complaints of gender-based sexual harassment. Lastly, the school heads shall likewise have the duty to provide and disseminate, in consultation with all persons in the educational institution, a code of conduct or school policy which shall first expressly reiterate the prohibition on gender-based sexual harassment. Two, to prescribe the procedures of the internal mechanism created under this act. And lastly, to set administrative penalties. So those are the 4 duties of the school heads provided for under this law. Now, what would be the liability of school heads if they would not follow the duties set forth under this law for them to follow? Now, there would be a penalty of a fine of not less than 5,000 pesos nor more than 10,000 pesos. Likewise, school heads would be made liable if they fail to act on a reported act of a gender-based sexual harassment committed in the educational and training institution, wherein the penalty would be fine of not less than 10,000 pesos nor more than 15,000 pesos. What would be the liability of minor students under RA 11313? Now, the law provides that minor students found to have committed acts of gender-based sexual harassment shall only be held liable for administrative sanctions by the school as stated in their handbook. Therefore, it appears that no criminal case for violation of RA 11313 can be filed against minor students. However, if the act or the crime or offense committed is covered by other laws, then minor students can be held criminally liable. Like, for example, if the crime committed was rape, the minor student could be charged for rape if such was the crime that he committed, but not for RA 11313. Section 33 of the law likewise provides that all schools shall educate students from the elementary to tertiary level about the provisions of this act and how they can report cases of gender-based streets, public spaces, and online sexual harassment committed against them. So, to those who are apprehensive of filing sexual harassment cases because their identities might be known, Section 26 of RA 11313 provides for confidentiality. It provides that at any stage of the investigation, prosecution, and trial of an offense under this act, the rights of the victim and the accused, who is a minor, shall be recognized. To those victims who are afraid that the perpetrator might come near them, the remedy is to ask for a restraining order as stated under Section 27, which provides that where appropriate, court, even before rendering a final decision, may issue an order directing the perpetrator to stay away from the offended person at a distance specified by the court, or to stay away from the residence, school, place of employment, or any specified place frequented by the offended person. If a victim wants to avail of psychological counseling because of the trauma that he or she has experienced or suffered, then he or she may do so and she can avail of it with the aid of the LGU and the DSWD, and the fees out of that psychological counseling will be borne by the perpetrator. Now, it is the PNP's Women's and Children's Protection Desk, which shall act on and attend to all complaints covered under RA 11313. So that ends my talk. I hope you learned something out of this webinar, and I likewise hope that those victims who have suffered or experienced this kind of sexual harassment, which I discussed, would now be able to come out in the open to report the incidents constituting the offense to the proper school authorities, and, if possible, to file the complaint before our office so that these offenders or perpetrators be made to answer of the crime that he or she has committed to you, so that sexual harassment would no longer prosper or would no longer be committed against anyone. So that's all. Thank you very much, and good day. I would like also to say hi to my daughter Fiona. She's a grade 10 student. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prosec-Nacor, for the very informative talk. It is reassuring that we have laws like Anti-Sexual Harassment Act of 1995 and the Safe Spaces Act, which protects everyone, especially women, from sexual harassment, both in physical and online spaces. If you have questions or insights on Prosec-Nacor's presentation, you will have the chance to share them during the open forum later. Our second speaker is an associate professor and former chairperson of Psychology Department of Ateneo de Manila University. She is currently the director of the Loyola School's Gender Hub, the Center for Gender Responsiveness in the Ateneo. She headed the task force that created the LS Gender Policy to build a gender-inclusive, gender-responsive, and gender-safe community in the Ateneo. Dr. Ofreneo has a PhD in social psychology and an MA in counseling psychology from Ateneo de Manila University. She has been an advocate of gender equality, gender justice, and gender and sexual diversity for over 20 years. Alongside teaching, training, and advocacy, she conducts research on gender issues, including sexual and gender-based violence, or SGBV, discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, or SOGI, and lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender, or LGBT issues. She also does counseling for cases of sexual harassment, sexual and gender-based violence, and SOGI concerns, and is a licensed psychologist. Join me in welcoming Dr. Mira Alexis P. Ofreneo.
Hello, I'm Dr. Mira, and I'm from the Ateneo de Manila University Gender Hub. Today, we will try to understand the effects of sexual and gender-based violence. Let's start with this word, safety. When one experiences a form of sexual violence, sexual harassment, a violation, that an act that is unwanted, done without one's consent, what is taken away from us is our sense of safety. That could mean physical safety, emotional safety, psychological safety. And so it is this safety that is lost. And we will return to this at the end of our presentation. Now let's define what SGBV is. So according to the UN, sexual and gender-based violence is any act that is done against a person's will, that is unwanted, without consent. And this is based on gender norms, ideas about gender, expectations about gender, our gender roles. That happens because of a system of unequal power relations. that in society, we see how power, may be given to some groups, while others are disempowered or marginalized. So oftentimes we refer to this system as patriarchy, referring to unequal power between men and women, but also between heterosexual people and people of diverse sexualities and sexual orientation, between cisgender people and people of diverse gender identities and expression. SGBV is also not singular. What might come to mind would be physical forms of sexual violence. For instance, rape, sexual assault, sexual abuse. But what we see here is that violence can also be verbal, can be through language, words. For instance, catcalling or remarks that target you as a woman, your body, remarks that might be misogynist, sexist, or targeting transgender people or people of diverse sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. So you also have transphobic, homophobic remarks. It could also be lewd sexual actions. It could be stalking, sexual jokes, relentless requests, persistent uninvited comments. So there is a variety of experiences that is captured under this umbrella term SGBV. In schools, we also refer to that as school-based SGBV. In the literature, we have noted that campus sexual violence does exist. It happens. Forms of bullying that are sexualized, which will have similar examples as I presented earlier. Who can experience SGBV? Anyone. While we have seen that SGBV has primarily targeted women and girls. And so the term we had for a long time was violence against women, VOW. We recognize that SGBV can also happen to men, can also target men, can happen between men, can happen between women, can target people of diverse sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression, including people who may identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, queer, and other diverse forms of identity. What we do recognize is that SGBV primarily affects women and girls. This is the number we have in the world, 1 in 3. 1 out of every 3 women and girls would experience some form of violence in their lifetime. Imagine that, 1/3 of our women population, that if you see 3 girls, one of them would experience some form of violence. That is too big a number. That is too huge a number. So it is so pervasive. And even in our own city, Quezon City, where Ateneo de Manila University is located, we have these figures for sexual harassment where women, 3 out of every 5 women would report some form of sexual harassment in their lifetime. 80% of women age 18 to 24 years old would have experienced harassment at least once. No? Majority of this is happening during the day. So literature would say 1 in 3, 1 in 5 of women would experience some form of campus sexual violence, and 1 in 4 children would experience sexualized bullying in school. So the numbers, even in the UK, the estimates, half of your LGBTIQ community would be bullied in school. And in the US, almost all students who identify as LGBTQ feel unsafe. Now, let's look at what SGBV can do to a person. The impact is varied. What does that mean? For some forms of harassment that people might find it easy to overcome, but that same form of harassment might be a struggle to overcome for others. And we acknowledge the differences, the variety of experience. We also recognize that it can have long-term effects, and people can carry the impact of an experience of violence, of harassment for a long time. They have to live with it for their entire lifetime. These effects could be physical, could be psychological, could be social. If it's a form of physical violence, then you can have cuts, you can have bruises, you can have dislocations. The physical impact can also be in terms of our reproductive health. You could have an unwanted pregnancy. You could acquire a sexually transmitted infection or STI, or even have some issues with your reproductive system. Let's take a moment to understand what is happening here in a case of, let's say, sexual violence, assault. And here we recognize that the danger one experiences in that moment, the experience of violation of safety, is registered at the neurobiological level. What does that mean? It means that our brain recognizes when we are in a safe situation. And let's say we feel safe. When we feel safe, we will engage. We will communicate, we will connect, we will engage with others in a soothing way. And we can self-soothe and we can calm ourselves. But when we feel unsafe, the brain mobilizes. And so there's this fight or flight response. Do we confront it? Do we hide away? Do we fight? Or do we flee? Most of us might be familiar with this fight or flight response. But in dangerous situations, the brain can activate an immobilization mode. And we are involuntarily, automatically immobilized. We freeze. So we have a third response. We have fight, we have flight, and we have freeze. And this is an automatic response that at the face of danger, the body, the brain, will try to protect you. And in an attempt to reestablish safety, because you feel unsafe, you feel that you are endangered, it will freeze. And so this freeze response is not activated willfully. So it is not a person's fault. It is an automatic response. As if one cannot move in an attempt to keep the self safe. And so this freeze response can have long-lasting impacts. And even if we are no longer in danger, we might freeze. We might fall into a freeze response when we are triggered. The psychological impact of SGBV can also come in the form of re-experiencing it. There can be triggers around us. And with these triggers, we may re-experience the event, or they may appear in our dreams. They can be suddenly recalled in our memories. or at times we are constantly thinking about it. Again, without us willfully doing so, it just comes to us. It intrudes. No, it is some form of persistent rumination where we are disturbed and bothered and rethinking, re-experiencing. And the feeling that can come with that, with an experience of gender-based violence, it's a feeling of shame because it's something you did not want. And it's something that happened to you without you willing it. And there's that shame. And that is very difficult to carry. That is something we have to handle with care, and kindness. But this is a very common response, this feeling of shame and blaming the self for what happened, even as we recognize, as we have defined it earlier, gender-based violence is an act that was done without a person's will. It was done without our consent. And it leads us to feeling ashamed of what happened. And with these feelings of shame and self-blame, rumination, and persistent and intrusive re-experiencing, one can fall into a depression, into anxiety, or experience symptoms of depression and anxiety. For example, LGBT youth who have experienced discrimination are 3 times more likely to experience a mental health condition. More than half of women with a sexual and gender-based violence experience would report mental health concerns. The psychological impact also can come in terms of suicidality, and a person might consider ending one's life. We have LGBT youth with SGBV experiences 4 times more likely attempting suicide, experiencing suicidal thoughts, engaging in self-harm. We have more than half of people who have experienced sexual violence attempting suicide. And so, truly, the psychological impact of SGBV is a cause of concern. In terms of its social impact, people may also feel stigmatized for the experience of harassment. At times, they are even blamed for the experience. So it's very difficult at times to find validation from others. Some may minimize it. Some may trivialize it. Some may think that it's not a big deal. And so there's also this loss of rights to safety because people may continue to make you feel unsafe because they cannot validate your experience or they further stigmatize you for the experience of violence or harassment. And so the learning environment, the working environment itself could become intimidating, could become hostile, could become offensive, threatening our sense of safety, perhaps producing humiliation and embarrassment, and continuing shame. And so at times this pushes people to silence. One may feel unsafe in school, might have difficulty focusing in class, may seem dazed and spaced out. So you could be absent and just skip school and it affects your academic performance. So again, to summarize, the effects could be physical, could be psychological, could be social. Again, a variety of experiences, of effects. And what we wish to do at the end of it would be to understand the person going through this experience, understand the person who has to live with the impact of sexual or gender-based violence, to be able to empathize with people who have experienced SGBV. And in the end, we return to our word, safety. If safety is what was lost, then safety is what we need to reclaim, what we help recreate. And so the first step, the first response is to be able to give a safe space, to be a safe space to people with an experience of sexual violence or harassment. Make them feel safe, listen to them, validate their story, be there with them, be sensitive to them. So allowing them to also exercise agency and control over their own healing and justice process. Because it is not easy, it's not simple, it can be difficult, it can be a struggle. It can have long-lasting impact. So we end here where we try to hear people with an experience of sexual violence, to really hold them in our minds and our hearts, to keep them safe. Today, we will talk about how we can respond to and prevent sexual harassment. For us, this is a call to everyone to make our schools, our communities, a safe space for all. So I'll start with this question. How can we respond, let's say, to issues of sexual harassment in our own schools, organizations, or communities? For this, I begin with an example from my own school, Ateneo de Manila University. In the Loyola schools, we were able to pass a policy, we call it our gender policy, that will build a gender inclusive, gender responsive, and gender safe community. So that is now our shared vision in the Loyola schools. And from that policy, our office, the Loyola Schools Gender Hub, was created. And our mission is to be the center for gender responsiveness in the Loyola schools. This policy is anchored on core Ignatian principles. As a Jesuit institution, we practice respect for human dignity, respect for integrity of the body, and respect for diversity as a way of embodying a faith that does justice for all. And with that, again, our vision, to be gender safe, to be gender inclusive, to be gender responsive, so that we can safeguard the well-being of all members of our community. So a safe school means that all members of our community will be safe from sexual harassment or any form of sexual or gender-based violence. An inclusive school means that all members of the community are free from discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression, or SOGI. And a responsive school means that all members of our community who may have experienced sexual harassment or any form of SGBV will be cared for. And for us, that is giving our all, attending to them, listening to them, and linking them to these services. And so I begin with this sharing as an example of what we can do in our schools by starting with the policy, creating a vision, a positive vision for our schools, and trying to implement that policy, trying to realize that vision. And so as part of our work in the Gender Hub, we train people so that they can respond and support those who may have experiences of SGBV or sexual harassment. And we would like to think that any person, anyone can respond and support people with an experience of sexual harassment. Anyone can practice care. Anyone can show compassion. Anyone can be a safe space. So the way we explain the process of responding is through this acronym, giving your all. Attending to them in a safe space, listening to their story, linking to support. This might be familiar to you. This is anchored on psychological first aid to look, listen, link. In our version, applied to this context and to these issues, it's to attend and be a safe space. And so attending means allowing them to approach you, allowing people to be comfortable, showing them attention through verbal and nonverbal ways, making eye contact, and expressing that you are here. I am here. I'm here for you. I can listen to you. I'm here to support you. And then listen. Practice empathic listening, allowing people to feel safe, to feel supported, allowing the person to take the lead on what to share. And as much as possible, trying to avoid probing or pressuring people to disclose. Just listen. Finally, to link them to support. We can check for their overall safety. Are they safe at that very moment? We can check for presence of support. If they have resources, if they have people they can go to for support. And then we link them to other possible sources of support. And in our case, it's linking to our office, the Gender Hub. So the idea here as well is that the support system, the support structure has to be in place so that people, any member of our community, can provide that safe space and then listen and then link to the support system. So this is an example of what we've shared in our community where we create awareness on the availability of support. Even in an online space, we tell people that we are still here for them. We are still here for you. We are your safe space online. And for anyone who has ever felt uncomfortable or harassed or violated, we send a message that we are here to listen and we are here to support you. So this is an example of the possible services that we can offer. So in our own schools, in your own settings, you might consider providing, for example, a service where people can simply process their experience, similar to counseling, so that people can unburden themselves and simply share their story. And there will be someone there to listen. And if they choose to do so, they might want to decide to file a case. And in that case, if there will be a disciplinary case, what we offer is service of companionship, which means we will be your companion from the beginning until the end of the disciplinary process. The message there is that you are not alone. We will be with you throughout the process from beginning to end. So this outlines an example of what happens if you avail of our case companion service or other services like a protective measure such as no contact or referral services to guidance and health services. We also provide the community a guide on what will happen for cases. And so when they link us to people and when they link people to the hub, they know what will happen. So this is an example of a process flow. And again, this is a suggestion. So for you, for your own organization or in your own setting, you might think about providing this process flow so that people will know what will happen to them if they approach you or if they access your services. So in this process flow, we can see, again, the Give All acronym, where we start with a member providing a safe space, listening to the story, and then linking people to the Gender Hub. And again, you will find a set of services: care, case companionship, referrals. So we always end with this, our acronym. What do you do? Our message is give your all. Attend to them in a safe space, listen to their story, and link them to support. Now let's go to the question of prevention. What can we do to prevent sexual harassment? Let me start by looking at our everyday social interactions. Let's say we are in an online classroom, or perhaps messaging each other online, or talking to friends, or it could be an interaction between a teacher and a student, or people inside the relationship. So these everyday social interactions. What we have as an example of a way of preventing sexual harassment is helping people become aware of their boundaries and the boundaries of others. That perhaps sometimes we may not be aware or conscious that we are already crossing the boundaries that make people feel safe and healthy. And so when we cross the boundaries, people start feeling unsafe, and then it becomes unhealthy. So we call this what to do when things get weird. So for students, sometimes they will say it feels weird, they didn't feel okay. So for us, let's recognize that. Let's start with that. So our suggestion is, let's do a check-in with ourselves. For students, even for teachers, employees, start with the self and check if there is anything in the social interaction that does not make you feel okay. Recognize it. This does not feel right. This does not feel good for me. I don't feel comfortable. It may not necessarily be expressed as I felt offended or I felt so violated, or I felt harassed, but it can start with a feeling of discomfort. Recognize that so that perhaps we can try to prevent the incident or from escalating. Perhaps we can try to express our discomfort, and perhaps we can try to put a stop to whatever it is that is creating that discomfort. So let's do a check-in with ourselves so that we know also what are our boundaries, the boundaries that help us feel safe and healthy. On the other side, we also have to check in with the other. And so we could be the teacher, even the student, or interacting with another student. And we have to ask ourselves, is there something that we are doing that is making the other person uncomfortable, perhaps? Am I already offending the person? Is the person already feeling hurt or upset or angry? Did I say something? Did I make a joke? Was there a remark I said that actually offended another person or made the person feel violated? So this is for us to become aware when our actions may be crossing the boundaries of others and it's making other people feel unsafe, making perhaps the environment offensive, intimidating, or even hostile. Are we making things difficult for others? As teachers, are we making things difficult for our students? Or even between peers? Is there something we're doing making our friends or our other colleagues uncomfortable? So this is to check in with others. Sometimes it can be even more difficult to establish these healthy boundaries because we recognize that there are power relations at play. There are gender inequalities. Sometimes there are scripts that actually perpetuate the crossing of boundaries and a culture of silence and shaming that makes it difficult to report or share a story or experience of harassment. For example, between a teacher and student, the teacher has inherent power over the student. So it's very difficult to confront the teacher. And there's also a script that tells us that students must follow the teacher. And then the culture of silence and shaming, because if a student is confused as to how he or she or they are feeling, it can be difficult to report. They can be afraid of the consequences, no? And they can be silenced. No? So there is shame also in reporting. So what we have to do is break all of these um, difficulties, no? The things that make it difficult to recognize that sexual harassment is maybe happening. And let's try to change the script. Let's start by being mindful of our own boundaries and then being mindful of the boundaries of others. If possible, let's try to express our discomfort. Or I don't feel okay with that. And let's check for comfort. Was that comfortable? Like, for example, you are going to give an assignment. You're going to make them watch a movie. It's possibly triggering. You might want to do a check. Will that be okay? Will you be comfortable? So we can start by checking in with ourselves and checking in with others. Now, how can we prevent sexual harassment as schools, as organizations, as communities? What are the bigger things that we can do? So we started with the small micro interactions in the everyday, but as a community, as an organization, we're talking about culture, the culture in our school, the culture in our community, and perhaps reflecting on how we can create a culture of equality and inclusivity. Let's start by breaking the silence, just as we are doing here, and trying to change the norms, making them inclusive and making them equal. So for this, we propose a 4S model for change: story, safe space, and support. Let's start with stories. Stories build awareness and build affinity. Affinity so that people will care for others' experiences and others' stories. Let's know their stories. We can start with simple conversations, talking to students, employees, people, knowing their stories of, let's say, being discriminated or marginalized, knowing their stories also of maybe standing up, and speaking for themselves, knowing their issues and concerns. It's not necessarily a formal research, but you can also do that. But we can start with simple conversations, talking to people, and then sharing these stories. Sharing these stories, inviting people to share their stories so that we hear people, we make the issues real, because these are real people talking, real people sharing their experiences. So let's share their stories. And through this storytelling, we can build awareness, we can build affinity so that we can care for each other, and we can put them into our workshops, our gender sensitivity workshops and training, allowing for awareness campaigns. We can also provide safe spaces. A safe space allows people to be strong, to build courage, to be who they are, to express whatever it is that they are thinking or feeling. A safe space builds community, a sense that we are all in this together. So let's build these safe spaces. For instance, in our office, we can make people feel welcome. So in the Gender Hub, we have a rainbow flag as a message to people that we are a safe space for all people, for all gender identities and expressions, for all sexualities. So for anyone who identifies as LGBTIQ, and other diverse gender and sexual identities. We can create openness among students, employees, people to develop allies, to build alliances, and to build support groups. We can even hold safe spaces for women only, for men only, or for LGBTIQ groups, or we can bring them all together in spaces of solidarity and diversity. Finally, we end with support. As I started this presentation, I shared a policy that we have put together in the Ateneo de Manila University Loyola schools. That policy is our way of saying that we will not tolerate sexual harassment. This is our zero tolerance policy. And so that is part of building a structure, because from policy, we can develop practices. And that allows our practices to be sustainable, our processes to be sustainable. So we can start with policies, and then we can provide the resources. We can provide information. We can have online platforms where people can report, where people can find support, or links to referrals and other services. We can also train people, our teachers, our students, our employees. As an example here, we can also find mentors, models for developing the values that we wish to create of caring and respect, and nonviolence. And we can train people, develop the materials so that we can realize our vision of making our university, our school, a safe space for all. So I'll end here. What can we do to respond to sexual harassment, to prevent sexual harassment? As you've seen, we can do a lot. But perhaps we can start by being a safe space for anyone. Schools Gender Hub.
Thank you for your insightful presentation, Dr. Ofreneo. I have many takeaways to share from your input, but we'll save it later during the open forum. And now that completes the first part of our webinar. We hope that you learned from the presentations of our speakers, because I did. And please stay with us as we proceed to the open forum.
So at this point, we recognize the presence of our participants from college, Ateneo de Naga University, college, senior high school, and junior high school departments. We're also joined by our students from graduate studies, and some of our staff and faculty as well. That was a really good presentation, by the way, Prosec Ann and Doc Mira. Okay, but later we will we will also ask and reflect. We now obviously come to our open forum, and may I now invite also Sir Sunny of CODI or CODI and OSA, and Mom Jules of CGC to join me right now. And okay, so our reactors will share. We have invited some reactors. They will be sharing their questions or insights relative to our webinar's theme and obviously the speaker's presentation. So participants are also welcome to post their reactions in the comment section of ADNU official Facebook chat box. Okay. And obviously, we don't have a lot of time, but we will try our best to read all of them and respond to them. Okay, so all right, so we will now have the reactions coming from the perspective of a teacher, parent, and also student. So to share us her reaction from from a perspective of a teacher, may I now call on my colleague, also my boss, Miss Joyce, Mary Joyce Bulao, the chairperson of the and faculty of the Social Science Department. Thank you, Joyce, for joining us this afternoon.
Hello, Marshall. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much to the speakers, because I myself learned a lot from the presentation. So I'm very happy that I attended this webinar, because I was given not just the legal perspective, but the psychosocial perspective as well, which is, I think, really very important, especially in this time when everybody is, I think, feeling a little more down than usual because of the pandemic. So I think my takeaway as a teacher is that sometimes, sometimes we teachers become very strict with our students. We demand a lot of things, especially because there are deliverables in the classroom, and we sometimes fail to consider what our students are going through. And one of the things that I gathered here is, creating a safe space in the classroom, on the part of the teacher. Sometimes, we want to break the silence, we joke around, and sometimes we're not very careful with our jokes. And I think the mom Ofreneo, tama ba ako? Gave us this reminder to always be aware, no? Always be aware of what our what we say in the classroom may have an impact. What we say in the classroom may actually have an impact on our students, because, for example, joking about, rape or harassment in the classroom may actually trigger some students because they may have experienced that. And sometimes we don't mean it, because we were just trying to break the ice, especially in Zoom, where everybody turns off their camera. But this is a reminder for us as well that we have to be careful. We have to be careful with our words. We have to be careful with our jokes. And aside from that, we have to be open to our students, open to communication with our students, because I myself have had students, share with me their experiences of sexual harassment. And I think it's true that there is this culture of silence. They would rather not say anything because of the stigma related to being a victim, and especially the culture of victim blaming. So as teachers, this is a very good reminder for us, that there is something we can do in the classroom with our students, and knowing the legal aspect as well, would help us, and guide us as we also guide our students in whatever experiences they may have had. And we never know, even us teachers may have had such experiences as well. So that's it. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Ma'am Joyce, for that insightful reflection. We will be giving our reactors a little later some time to also react to some of your responses. Now, let's hear it from our invited parents now to give us a parent's perspective. So we have invited Sir Reynor Rodriguez. He's also the senior high school prefect of students. Hello, sir. Good afternoon po. We would like to hear your thoughts on the presentation as well.
Yeah. Good afternoon po. Personally, first, I'd like to thank the Office of the Student Affairs, the OSA, for spearheading this webinar on safe space and sexual harassment. Of course, to our resource speakers who have shared their competence and expertise. Surely, you have given us either reminders or sort of seed knowledge about our topic that is indeed critical even during this time of physical quarantine. Moving forward, instead of a question, I'd like to have some reflection about what I have heard from the two resource speakers. First, I was struck by the phrase change in culture and the word boundaries by Dr. Mira's talk a while back. While reflecting, I said to myself that perhaps it is okay to add another phrase, which is to change the conversation. As a parent reactor, schools and other places outside our homes actually, for me, will never be a harassment-free environment if we will not change the conversation in our homes. Fathers like me have great responsibilities to change the conversation and the culture in our family. As a parent, modeling is a very important factor on how our sons treat the opposite sex, and at the same time, how our daughters act to be safe in all places. It is at home that respect and the valuing of every person's dignity and human rights begin. So in order for us to change the conversation, to change the culture, parents out there, including myself, must start embracing our responsibilities as either a father or a mother in its truest sense. This actually starts with self-respect and love so that we can, of course, we can share them to others, to our spouses and to our children, but always in that tripartite relationship involving our Lord Jesus Christ. The laws are promulgated for our safety and protection as shared by Prosecutor Antonette, and understanding about boundaries, safe space, and sexual harassment as shared by Dr. Mira are important details that we can reflect upon to commit that we will help each other so that we can stop this unwanted behavior in our community. Community within our family, community within our school, community within our place or locality, because hand in hand, we can stop this for as long as it begins from the very basic, which is the home, wherein the children are educated on how to prevent sexual harassment and to give free spaces to each and every one of us. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Rainer. Yeah, indeed, we all have responsibilities, no? Kahit sa ating mga bahay. All right, thank you, Sir Rainer, for giving us your perspective on this matter. May we now call on our next reactor, our last reactor for this afternoon, Miss Carla Faye Abila, third-year BS Psychology student, to share her reaction from the student's view. Hi, Carla. Good afternoon.
Hi po. Hi, good afternoon to our speakers, Dr. Mira Ofreneo and Prosecutor Antonette Nacor, to the Ateneo faculty and staff, to my fellow students, and to everyone who is with us today. So first of all, I would like to thank OSA for organizing this event relevant to
All right, Carla, I think you're muted.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you now. I'm sorry for that.
Okay. So, hindi po ako narinig kanina. So, okay po. Again, to reiterate everything that I've said, good afternoon to our speakers, Dr. Mira Ofreneo and Prosecutor Antonette Nacor, to the faculty staff, and to my fellow students, and to everyone who is with us today. All right, so first of all, I would like to thank OSA for organizing this webinar relevant to Women's Month celebration. Okay, I will have two parts po on my part. First, I will give my reaction to the first talk of Dr. Mira Ofreneo and a question to Prosecutor Nacor. So first, thank you, Dr. Mira Ofreneo, for sharing with us how to understand and treat someone who has experienced sexual harassment. It is significant to give our all, to give our attention, to listen to their story, and to link them to support. But to add, from the perspective of the student body, I think it's not enough to just be aware of what sexual harassment is. We should actively challenge the patriarchal society that fosters violence and abuse, that condones oppressions against the vulnerable, but persecutes the victim. For me, the best way to prevent sexual harassment in school, workplace, and in the community is through proper sex education. One's perspective about the other starts from home. Parents should teach their children at a young age to respect others. And also, it is their duty to teach their children about consent. And I believe na kailangan din itong ituro ng ating mga schools sa ating mga students. And in addition, they should be taught that their bodies or our bodies are not meant to be touched without permission or objects to be treated as disposable toys. I agree with the notion that we have to create a safe space for women and all gender, but it can only be done if we get to the roots of abuse. No matter how many seminars we carry out and laws we implement, sexual abuse and violence will not be completely eliminated since patriarchal values are deeply ingrained in our society. So not until we recognize and address the origins of sexual oppression and exploitation, we cannot entirely eradicate all forms of sexual harassment in the society. So with this, I hope we all take courage and stop sexual harassment. Again, thank you, Dr. Mira Ofreneo. Now for my question, for Prosecutor Antonette Nacor, thank you for that very informative talk about RA 11313 or the Safe Spaces Act. I appreciate how you delivered the law in the most understandable way, from the forms of sexual harassments, its types, and the penalties. So I just have two questions po, ma'am. First po, how long would it take to process a sexual harassment complaint?
Prosecution?
Okay. Actually, there is no specific time frame in filing the complaint for any complaint for that matter, because it starts with the preparation, the execution of the affidavits, and taking of the affidavits also of the witnesses, and if there are evidence to be submitted, the gathering of those evidence first, and then it's either the police or the private lawyer would prepare the complaint, and then if the complaint is already submitted in our office, the rule actually is once a complaint is filed, the case will be raffled to everyone. The case will be raffled, and then if it is already raffled to a specific prosecutor, then that prosecutor has a period of 60 days within which to resolve the case. So it's either if there is probable cause, the case will be filed, and if there is no probable cause, the case will be dismissed. And then later on, upon, for example, finding of probable cause, then the resolution is also submitted to the chief for her review. So the chief would either affirm or would reverse your resolution. So if the chief is also given a period of 60 days from her receipt. So all in all, in our office, it takes around 120 days already. And then after that, if there is probable cause, then it will be submitted to the court. And then once raffled, then the case will start with, the case will already start. However, there is, I cannot say a definite time frame like 1 year or 2 years, because it depends on many factors. Like sometimes, even if a case is scheduled, sometimes it would not proceed because the judge has a seminar, or that any of the prosecutor, the counsel for the defendant or the judge is not around for one reason or another, and sometimes for fortuitous event, something like that. And sometimes also another factor is the number of cases filed in that court. It may be that there are many cases filed in that court. So if the hearing, let us say for arraignment, is scheduled January, however, since there are many cases in that court, siguro baka February na yung pre-trial, and then yung trials naman on such later dates. So something like that.
Yeah, thank you po, ma'am. Another one po. What if there is no physical evidence that can be presented, or yung available lang po is yung statement po ng person na nag-file? Would it be just dissolved or mag-go on pa po ang case?
Okay. So, depende yun po sa case. So, actually talaga, pag halimbawa yung mga sa sexual abuses talaga, it is oftenly being made secret, diba? So, seldom naman na it would happen that it could be seen by the public, di ba? Kasi that would constitute talaga evidence. There would be witnesses and then something like that. These perpetrators or offenders would really do that when the victim is alone. So the sole evidence actually is the testimony of that victim. So the victim's testimony should stand on its own merit. And even that, it could already be enough to sustain conviction.
Thank you so much po. That would be all po.
All right, thank you, Carla. All right, I think, since Prosec Ann already answered questions of Carla, let's ask Doc Ofreneo or Doc Mira to also give us a brief response, perhaps to the reactors of Ma'am Joyce, Sir Raynor, and Carla as well.
Yeah, I did put in the chat box. Thank you so much for the reaction. I agree, no, and I appreciate the response of all three, Ma'am Joyce, Sir Raynor, and Carla. I think we all agree that we need to start where we are. So whether that's in the home or in the classroom. And for Carla, I think for our young people, it's really the desire to change, no? What to change the culture. And it's difficult, no? Because when we say culture, it can sound so huge. Like how do you change culture? How do you change norms? No, but what I appreciate is that we can begin where we are in the home, as Sir Raynor said. And I appreciated that it's also how we teach, how we raise our children, no? How we show them how we can respect rights, even of children, no? And even with Ma'am Joyce, how we can be sensitive to our students and what they are experiencing, and even sensitive to each other. So I'll share with what Carla said, no? Let's try to confront this dominant culture that perpetuates harassment. No, it's time to do something. No, let's be part of the solution. So I'm just really grateful to be able to be with you today. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Doc Mira. And also thank you, Ma'am Joy, Sir Raynor, and Carla for your heartfelt insights, no, regarding our topic this afternoon. I have a personal question, however. I think this is actually a common cases siguro perhaps na may takot sa parte ng mga survivors to really speak up sa mga administration because andun yung parang idea na baka kampihan lang din naman, halimbawa si teacher, si administrator, why would I even dare to speak up? Because after all, nakakatakot. Ang daming possible na kalaban along the way and I will feel invalidated, no? How are we going to address this in legal aspect and also in psychological aspect, Prosec Ann and Doc Mira? Perhaps Prosec Ann can go first and Doc Mira after?
I think Doc Mira first.
All right, Doc Mira.
Yes, thank you for that question. We really recognize that, no, the difficulty of reporting and sharing, given that we see a culture of silencing and shaming. No? So we do recognize that, and I think why we are trying to call for this, like as I said, no, give your all, to just be able to first give attention and listen. That it's okay to share this kind of experience. I think in schools, what we can do is to be able to provide a space where people can freely report and that they know that when they go to this space, they will not be judged. So as an example, in Ateneo de Manila, my office, which is the Loyola School's Gender Hub, people know that in that space, they can share. There's no judgment. And if someone wishes to report, we journey with them. So we protect them from having to interact with so many other people and offices. So that's one thing we can do, making the offices that handle cases independent from each other so that survivor care for those who have experienced harassment will not be affected by the case process or the discipline process. And that we're protected from having to deal with other offices, from having to deal with administrators, And the survivor, for example, never has to talk to anyone else, for example, but the person they reported to. So that's a protection for the survivor. It allows the survivor to feel safe also in the journey. Maybe I'll just stop there and allow Prosecutor Antonette to Nacor to share.
Thanks, Doc Mira. Prosec Ann?
Yes, yes, sir. I think the school should likewise encourage the students to report in by way of making the students feel that they would not be discriminated upon, the warmth or the empathy that they would get from the school, because from the person in charge who would be given that task, the student would already know the personality of that officer in charge. So that person should be someone that the students must trust, so that they would not be apprehensive to report whatever kind of abuse that they have encountered. And also, there should not have been a history of discrimination from the school, because the student, if he or she would base from that previous history, then that victim would not be encouraged to speak out.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Prosec Ann. Thank you also, Doc Mira. We do actually have a related question coming from Efren Dominic, BS Psychology student. He's asking, how could we, this is actually a question to Ma'am Julma of the College Guidance Center. He's actually asking the student, no? How could we avail the services in line to SGBV or psychological services in the ADNU premises po through online platforms? Ma'am Jules?
Yes, good afternoon, Marshall. Thank you to Efren for asking that question. Ano? And I think for the other students then who might be interested to avail of our services pertaining to gender-related concerns, you can always reach us via our email. That's cgc@gbox.adnu.edu.ph. So what you can get there would be, should you need counseling, we can provide that. If you need naman gender education related session by different by different groups, we could also do that. And then should there be requests for webinars on different gender related and other sexual issues, definitely we can also do that in the College Guidance Center. There's a specific person who is our point person for that, and that's Miss Bitat Lason. So thank you, Doc Marshall.
Thank you, Ma'am Jules. Okay. Prosec Ann, merong curious student dito, no? And also, I think, Doc Mira, based on your experience, also can answer this one. Sabi ni Iza Sichung, what is the probability of winning sexual harassment cases here in the Philippines? Or siguro, pwede nating pag-usapan din ano yung mga barriers or constraints from not winning sexual harassment case here in the Philippines. Prosec Ann?
Okay. Yung the probability of winning cases kasi depends on the willingness of the victim. The victim himself or herself should really be ready to face all the challenges when it comes already, specifically when it is for trial. Now, she should not be disheartened. He or she should really be tough to sometimes it takes a long time really. So there should be patience and perseverance. She should have that determination to really get the justice that he or she should deserve. That should be the factor so that she would be able to push through and endure the long and tedious process of our judicial system. Because sometimes it's really the problem. Because our courts are really clogged with so many cases that sometimes it would really take so long. So oftentimes the victims would be discouraged to continue in pursuing the case, so that would stop them from pursuing with the case. So that's the main problem.
All right, I see. Thanks, Prosec. And Doc Mira, in your experience, generally?
Yes, I think maybe the school administrative process or disciplinary process would be might be different from the legal process because the legal process has specific requirements that the school may not have. You know, the like for example the basis for determining certain offenses legally no are more stringent compared to, let's say, a disciplinary case in a school. And so I would say there might be a difference there, that but we do always let people know that it is always within their rights to file both an administrative case and in the school, and also the legal case, no, which will be outside the school. I would say though that it's let us encourage people to report. And while people might think it's difficult, it can lead to recognizing and validating the experience of the person who felt harassed, no, or who experienced harassment. And so maybe I'll just share that message, no, because the determining factors are are varied, no, and as long as we begin with that strength to be able to report it, and with that truth that you know that this is your experience, I'll hold on to that and then allow the process to proceed, no? And let the justice system, whatever justice system we have in our schools or in our community or municipality or city, allow that to work, no, so that we can achieve justice.
Okay. Thank you, Doc Mira. Wow. I wish we do have a lot of time. But since Sir Sunny is here, the chairman of CODI, Committee on Decorum and Investigation, Sir Sunny, may we ask you, how are we doing as a community regarding this possible or cases like this? Sir Sunny, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Marshall. Siguro I will address the question not only as part of CODI, but also as part of the Office of Student Affairs and then this university community. I'd like to assure our students, especially, that the university and we at the OSA, the CGC, and many other student formation and student support offices. Now, we are determined to maintain an environment that is conducive to learning, or as we have been discussing, yung safe spaces for all. We are very much aware and we do observe our responsibility, given our special parental authority as employees, okay, as companions of our students. We have put in place structures, programs and services to provide students at all levels, a safe space for sabi nga, for storytelling, of their experiences and challenges. We have people like formators, counselors, who are very much willing to listen to students' concerns. And we have support structures, we have linkages, and we have a lot more to offer the students in this issue. We may not be perfect, but please know that we are doing our very best to improve and to update. I think it is very important that students become interested, in knowing the policies, the laws that we have, the structures, programs, and services that we have, even if they don't or never experienced sexual harassment. The thing is that sometimes ang ibang estudyante just become interested in the issue when they experience it. So I'd like to encourage them to take advantage of the awareness sessions that we have, the orientations that we have, webinars like this, even during this pandemic. You know, it is very important that they are armed with knowledge on what to do, where to go, um, when they experience this this violation of their human right, of their dignity as persons. So there.
All right. Thank you, Sir Sunny. Oh, okay. All right. Thank you, Sir Sunny. I think we do have a lot of questions actually coming in, but obviously we don't have time to respond to them. But again, if you have questions, please comment them, and then we'll actually provide time to share these questions to our speakers, no, and probably they could help us answer this after, no, this webinar or in the future, no. But we do our team actually prepared a sample scenario in which we will be asking our presenters to provide an advice, no. So here's the scenario. My team is actually um, posting it right now. Okay, so let me read it, no. Andre has been receiving sexist remarks online, either through public posts or private messages. The senders are either strangers or acquaintances, but Andre never had the guts to report it because he is thinking that he might not be taken seriously by authorities. Prosec and Doc Mira, perhaps you could give us probably advice or a quick or a brief uh, analysis on this particular case, perhaps. Let's first ask Prosec Ann, and then let's ask also later Doc
Uh,
Mira.
Maybe, sir, in this case, Andre should first have an innate trust already to our police authorities or to the proper authorities that he would be approaching to. But since it is online, so the authorities involved would be the Children and Women and Children's Protection Desk or the PNP Anti-Cybercrime. So Andre should report his concern there. He should have full trust to them to report his concerns, and that if those evidences that he has with him, he should submit it to them. Or if he wouldn't know how to gather such evidence, he should seek this authority's help so that he would have those evidences ready for him to be able to file his complaint already in court.
So Andre needs to have the trust to the authorities and also confidence to really voice out, no, his his case. No, let me hear Doc Mira. Doc Mira, your thoughts on an advice to Andre?
Andre, I hope that you will be able um, to share the experience, maybe to begin with a confidant, like with a friend. So I would think that while we see the harassment, for example, as it's a for example, it's a legal issue. It is something that you can file a case to report. You can report it, but also to recognize that you may be dealing with the effect of receiving all of these sexist remarks, and at times that can make you feel um, troubled or disturbed, no, or simply uncomfortable. And I would suggest that maybe you can unload and share that to a friend. And if you can, then maybe report it to the office that takes care of this inside the school, like maybe the counseling office or the student, the office that handles concerns, no, let's say of students. I would suggest too that you document, so meaning copy all of these exchanges so that you have that the material evidence if ever you do decide to push forward with the complaint, whether it's disciplinary or whether it's legal.
All right.
Yes, Doc Marshall, I'd like
Right, Sir
also
Sunny.
to answer the question. I agree with both of them. Andre can actually report it to the police, but also to the school. If the sender of such sexist remarks or messages is a fellow student in the university, okay, Andre may report it to the Office of Student Affairs or to the prefects if they are in the senior high school. They can also share the information to their guidance counselors. But I agree with Doc Mira that please do a screenshot of the messages as your proof. No, don't forget this documentation. Now, if the offender is a student of another school, the the university can also help Andre in coordinating with our counterparts now in filing a complaint. We have a very good relationship with our counterparts in another schools. I also advise Andre to please do not go along with them. Kumbaga, wag sabayan na you will also send a similar sexist remarks or messages. Andre can tell them that their messages or posts offend him and that he wants them to stop. Otherwise, uh, he will report to the authorities. But again, please document the thread of messages. What burahin? Okay, have a screenshot of their messages or the conversation. That would be very much helpful in facilitating possible grievance reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Sunny. I think magandang malaman na may si Andre, meron siyang iba't ibang layer of support, no, coming from the kaibigan, sa kapamilya, and then also community and university. And siguro from there, he can gather his courage to report this because again, meron namang proteksyon, no, ng batas ang mga gatong klaseng violence, no, kahit sa mga online situation na ganito, especially na limited ang face-to-face interactions natin. I think that's how we want to conclude our open forum. Thank you so much, Prosec Ann and Doc Mira, for generously sharing your thoughts on this. No, actually, I believe you both are so busy with your schedules, and you provided us time to clarify and enlighten us with all of these issues. No, very very important issues. Um, uh, and also to our reactors for their insightful responses and reactions na coming from the parents, from the faculty, and also from students themselves. No, so now to show our gratitude for our resource speakers for their time and effort, we now present this electronic certificate of appreciation. Let me read the citations. First, for Prosec-Nacor, the certificate reads, the College Guidance Center Program on Gender Concerns, Office of Student Affairs, Committee on Decorum and Investigation at Ateneo de Naga University present this certificate of appreciation to to Prosec Antonette Majella M. Sumayao-Nacor for her generously sharing her expertise and services as resource speaker in the information activity Take Courage, Stop Sexual Harassment, a webinar on understanding and preventing sexual harassment held on March 26, 2021. Given this 26th of March 2021 at the Ateneo de Naga University, City of Naga, Philippines, signed by Ms. Medusa M. Luzon, Coordinator for Gender Concerns, Ms. Janice L. Tresvalles, the Program Officer for Student Welfare, Safety and Ethics, Ms. Maria Elaine A. Florese, Director of College Guidance Center, Mr. Rodolfo S.B. Vertus Jr., Director of Student Affairs and Chairperson of CODI, and Ms. Janet Badong Badilla, Executive Director for Mission and Identity, and Father Robert Ezequiel E. Rivera S.J., University President of Ateneo de Naga University. The same citation also presented to Dr. Mira Alexis P. Ofreneo. Thank you very much for to our resource speakers. We now have come to the end of our program. So before we conclude this event, I also, well, basically it's so hard for to synthesize everything because I already shared it, no. But for me, it's importante na yung respeto, no, sa spasyo, and also recognizing those boundaries as mentioned by Dr. Mira here. And also maganda na maintindihan yung awareness ay hindi lang sa sarili but awareness din sa iba, no. I like that for me the catchy one is that attend, listen, and link, no, because we do have facilities, support systems that can be utilized, no, especially in this particular situation, no. At mahalaga ang suporta hindi lang ng ating mga kaibigan but also these institutions. All right, so yeah, I think at this point we also want to recognize also the extend our gratitude also to our, not only to our speakers but also to our reactors and participants, no, for joining us in this afternoon's event. From the organizer Vons, Janice, Miss Bitat, and Miss Candy, now the Office of Student Affairs, the College Guidance Center, the Committee on Decorum and Investigation. Thank you so much for your hard work and your relentless help. Okay, so reminder to all the participants, please don't forget to accomplish your evaluation forms through the link posted. Yan, sa QR code, no? Certificate of attendance will be issued after you filled out the form. And again, we gather for a quick closing prayer. I think let's end it with a closing prayer, if you may. So, um, Almighty Father, we thank you for all the things that we accomplished, all the emotions that we felt, and most of all, to the insights that we learned. May we achieve all the objectives we had set. Also, we pray that when things go rough, rather, we do not go well according to our plans. Please let this remind us that no matter what we may encounter in this journey, we can accomplish all of this under your loving guidance. We ask this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. All right, so thank you everyone ulit. Maraming salamat. Ingat po at Diyos mabalos.